the criticism with an overview framing, and you can put terrorism at the bottom because we'll see.
Is there a new sheet for, do I need a new sheet for the overview?
It's not long, so if you left space at the top, then you're good.
Yeah. Quote you on that later.
Oh, good. There are no cards in it. Everybody good? I know lose my voice when we say Yep. Okay, are you good? Yes. Heteronormativity is a process of otherization that makes queer bodies fungible, perpetuates systemic hierarchies that determine normacy, and attempts to force those notions of normacy onto individuals, which causes psychological violence. It works to determine what actions and looks are acceptable in society and politics. Bodies who are deemed not fit to those models are targeted and exterminated. Burke says that this also manifests itself in the targeting of bodies leading violence, conflict, and wars inevitable because we are socially predisposed to believe that difference from the norm is something to fear. The alternative is to vote negative. We are at war with the system. The act engages with use of balance to identify with the other in face of politics that exclusionary civilization, striving for a better future is exclusionary to the queer body who never has access to this space. Aligning with negativity presents a revolution to the dominant logic and view of the truth, providing a method subverting violence at Schotten, which means if you go down line by line in their framework argument. First off, you get to weigh the affirmative, which means that we're not killing the ground of fair and fairness argument or our interpretation. Second, the counter-interpretation, which we think is net better than this, is that the app should define the interpretation of the one you see and begin to test the implementation of methodology. Interpretation is better because it tests the complexities of the app for testing the ground by stopping the app from reflecting the infinity of the one you see, and the framework is accusation that after the transcript action makes science is not dominant voices, the production of paper model of debate that's nothing more than the exchange of views among the like-minded makes a little bit of context meaning that this reproduces the common fear that prowls warfare is irrespective of the rest. Only criticism you vote negative Butler for. The Senate debate of which conclusion would confuse changes could confuse with the anarchic substance to produce the common affair which is going to currently burst the brain of the strategy quelling the limits to reach critical debate of headstones like all terrorism is besides one is not much to lose and satisfied with one is not simple one thing someone who will speak of a voice that's understood for closer to the creed and the public domain to debate that debate conversation to views among the like-minded hegemon understand the politics to choose through circuit thriving won't be admissible without disposed problems as a way the worst things good to the warhead to populace center capabilities to feel hangs in the balance and state institutions don't check violence. God says the state works to reduce chaos or colonialization populace to more than the name of Denmark process which means that legal technique is not a net better way that their framework is going to be better, which means that they are not a prerequisite to any type of engagement on their affirmative, which means that they are not going to be able to hold the government accountable because you cross by the ground argument from the framework flow. When you go to legal institutions and try to engage in that type of education, they're going to co-op you and be able to say what type of information you're going to be doing because they get to define what you are. The next two arguments you can group because they're just debating inevitable arguments, but our next section also talks about how we orient ourselves to the space because society is a heteronormative orientation. Yes, we are in this space and going to do that, but it's how we orient ourselves. If you say that we should engage, but there's never a productive engagement in this space, the criticism is about an orientation. We reject that as Russell Schotten evidence saying that we refuse to orient that because we're at war with the system, which you don't get to do that. The next argument is representation reality. First, representation manifests violence in the status quo. This is in the overview. Second, there are evidence that some psychological violence in academic spaces. We must ask the larger question of whether those representations are good for debate. And third is about representations. First, systems representations determine every prediction about policy outcomes and determine policy actions in advance. They have through the actions and desirability to create effect before you can evaluate any of their impacts. Jordy 06. Representations are interpreted prism through the decision-making sense of political reality. They find subjective value to other actors and determine significant condition representation, not objective fundamentally political representations or struggles representation of reality from how actors act and representation and policy decision-makers adopt the limits course of action that are politically thinking, which means you can go to the complexity theory argument. Actors are in space assumes that actors are static and predictability, but no, they act in unpredictable ways, which means the complexity theory is necessary, which is also what Ahmed is talking about when you try to securitize and it assumes that everything is knowable and hence predictable. But Bird enacts this method and says that we need to have an idea of becoming, and that is what a net better system to actually resolve and have to impact their isolating, which means we're net better to even resolve the instances that they're isolating, which means you can go to the endless word theory. This is what we're talking about versus, and we need to have the instance that we are isolating only announced above means that we're net better on this because Ray just makes an assertion and doesn't actually say how we are to solve back for this, which means that the impact scenario and heteronormativity that we are isolating is what we are going to solve back for, which Gray doesn't ever actually talk about, which means it's not applicable. The next argument was answered, but this is another discourse argument, which means you can group the next two whole arguments. One, we're not going to link to this because it's all about fair, which is not the alternative and how that is going to do something. One, we don't ever say that we can next argument is all of Schotten's analysis is that extinction is inevitable for the queer body, which means that there's never going to be anything that we can do for that, and it's all about how we stand and failure and that orientation, which means that there's no link to the alternative for this, and it just reproduces. And it all talks about capitalism and failure, which is not any specific to that, and it's another securitizing instance of climate change, which means they just link back further to the criticism of what I'm talking about. Which means the next arguments are just going to go back to the one and then the trade-off argument, but this goes back to the mathematics above with Brown, which means that they're going to go to that. The next argument is Berghoff, which is this is not an alternative, it's all about negativity, which they don't have an answer to. State inevitable, here we'll read a card. The state only has existence in formative repetition of discourse, the disruption and rejection of discourses of security, undercut the discourse of foundations of the state and destroys its legitimacy. All solves disciplinary part of the state of balance of exclusion, Campbell 98. The state is performing constituted through boundaries that does not the self and the other perform construction, genders and analogous the constitution of the state is having no ontology to the far from acts which constitute reality, composition, but discipline obligation, the normalization, criticizing, which is the body politic functions as regulation and the normalization and to be privileged stylized access to our changes to states and never any distinction between elements of identity practice and concept can never be resolved because the performing nature of identity can never be revealed. This render state and never linked to reproduction status will be that the inability to see the guarantees of the success and identity articulation needed to form policies that the constitution is impossible, which BPS Varsity said that the law is unconditional. Well, we never said that coming out of course. We just said that we were going to say you were bad, which means that any link I win means that the net bad and increased heteronormativity, which is the reason why they're going to be bad. I don't have to go for the alternative. They said that they alternatives reason why they're going to be bad. They never asked us how the alternative functions, which means one, we're not big because all my analysis above is explaining how that functions, which means that it's not going to be bad for education or fairness, which means that you could have access across the church, which means it's not important. We're not ignoring pig. There's no reason why we're going to do the plan. We just say that we resolve the impacts to that because you say that we isolating terrorism legal education, but one is we're going to prove on case debate. There's no reason why terrorism is ever actually going to happen. We say that one, you construct those threats, which in Mike is in here two, and then one not, which means we're not stealing ground doing it, and it's not a reason to vote us, and you can just one reject the alternative, and we'll just want to link. And then they said that there's no, we don't solve for this because there's no alternative. When they don't really get this card, so I don't know what it's going for, but all the analysis above is just reason why we're going to solve back for instance of violence and heteronormativity, even and they would have said the case is going to outweigh that because it's the argument of how you make bodies fungible, which even they're going to do with that is how you're going to do this, and there's the reason why in this debate space in particular queer bodies and any type of alternative knowledge production is excluded, which all information contention is going to be worse on, which means you can go to that now. We're just going to get a little messy here. They don't ever address the root matter, which you can pull at the top of the flow here, which is how the apps, preservation of righteous American faiths, militaristic culture by justifying America's global world past, and just the lines to be narrated in the name of righteous power to support new political projects. They say that they recognize the problems, but their process evidence has democracy and talking about how they can reorient themselves and even how they go to regionalism instances. The process of when he says how they still engage in these democratic instances, that's just a complete withdrawal. We still engage in those instances. That's making us still look good even if we withdraw from one instance. We say that this is bad because it's just insights how America is good. We can still engage in global type of politics. This is bad. You can also send disgrace evidence how method needs to come first. The affirming contingent constructs policy making as natural objective mode of analysis, which forecloses considerations of different but relevant voices to impacts. One hegemony and heteronormativity, marginalization of that which appears different in the definition of our impacts or ideas are assumed to say business as usual. Two is circle policy, but when alternative ideas are rejected, ideas which are relevant to policy calculus are necessary. For example, if terrorist studies are ignored, that blowback terrorism isn't even considered its possibility, and policies produce further dimensions prefer our evidence contextual to policy debate, and good is not good enough here. You're just an instance of heteronormativity that because you're constantly constructing to a different type of center, which means you can go to them assuming evidence here. They say them assuming is wrong because it's not contextualized to debate, but the logic of preemption produces that which it seeks to secure against facts emerging the effective ground of futurity. The securitization of rhetoric in this round produces a response whose one is either perceived as that which we are expecting because they are predisposed to expect it, or two is actually what they were expecting because of preempts demand a reactionary response. The impact and securitization of the base rates, which is the targeting of those who are secured against the reproduction of the debate. They actually doesn't have to be contextualized to the debate space because it's still an argumentative form. It doesn't literally need to say the words policy debate, and even if one that has to do that, they're still scripting what Michael and I have to do, even if they win. That yes, we still read AK. They're still saying what they're going to do and scripting an idea onto us and saying what we're going to have to do, which is the reason why you should have to vote them out. But you can also extend the Brown evidence and objectify the law simply to achieve liberal ends and ignore the substantive nature of law itself and its effect on the bodies placed under the act. It's a project that's the legal system which generates rights as placeholders which bodies must occupy to gain recognition by the state. When we approach the state to ask for rights, we emerge as legally defined identities such as citizens, women, etc., which advance community, which is also back on the cater, which is why you need to prefer methods coming out of this. That you can also extend the Campbell evidence, which have foreign policy and that type of action consent to self and another because we act as this one type of body and there are a different type of body. It's an economy and a hierarchy coming out of that, which is why their actions and their methodology needs to be rejected because it's still operates off the hierarchy, which the criticism rejects coming out of them. And you can also extend the Scott evidence, which means that when we use that state and legal codes instead of type of uniformity because they script a similar type of coloniality. They don't resolve this because they still use the state.
Alright, I'm gonna take a second. Okay. Stop now.
Okay.
Alright. 18.
You have 452 left.
Thank you. Alright. Framework. You say that we can weigh the ath and then you make a counter interpretation.
Yeah.
Can we also weigh the ath under the counter interpretation?
Yeah, the argument is just you have to, so I can tell you specifically, it's you have to defend implementation and methodology.
How
So
is
it's
the
making
ath
sure,
not a defense of its implementation and methodology?
yeah, it's just making sure that in the 1AR it's not just like, oh, we just do this part. Does that make sense?
What does that mean?
You
We just do
understand?
this part, like we sever parts of the ath? Like,
Yeah, it's just a setting up, because you say all of this policy and all of this, we think that you should also defend the methodology that you present, which is
So,
our interpretation.
what
We're not
part of-
mooting any part of the 1EC.
what part of our
Which is your
method
interpretation.
is per se bad?
Well, that's what the links are, which Michael's also going to get to. We think that the way you construct foreign policy on your framing contention, the way that you use legal options, and the way you think that, like, your orientation to the state.
Is it, and
we indict.
this is a key link articulation. Is
Sure.
it the way we do those things or
Well, it's
that
also
you do
doing
those
them.
things? Because there's a
Well,
important
it's-
distinction there.
Well, Campbell indicts foreign policy in and of itself because it uses a, we're going to operate this way, and there's a self and there's an other that we interact with. That's bad to Campbell because it's a hierarchical situation.
So we just shouldn't construct any kind of foreign policy ever?
You shouldn't construct a self and an other, which Campbell says foreign policy does. And then there's also the Brown argument, and then there's the security links, and then there's also the queer theory links, which,
So the debate-based arguments you're making, your 2NC articulation is that it's how we orient ourselves to the space. Why is
I mean, the
your
argument is not that we
orientation-
tear debate down.
Not that we tear debate down?
Yeah.
So why is the negatives orientation towards debate something that makes it less heteronormative?
Because it shows that we're at war with the system and we orient ourselves towards death and
So
negativity.
you're at war with the system, but the goal
Yes.
is not to tear it down. So what is the point of the war then? I'm very confused by this.
Well, it's a rhetoric thing. It shows that, well, that's also an argument we make versus Hall, is that the way academic spaces work and that extinction is inevitable, and that's a position that's placed onto the queer body. Like, hope doesn't exist.
Hope just doesn't exist, so why?
That's an argument Shotton makes,
So
yes.
why vote negative? If you're right about all of your pessimism arguments, why not vote half on presumption?
Because then it aligns, Shatz, I don't know what you want to call it. It aligns the judge with negativity.
Yeah, but
and
if your
the
pessimism
way-
arguments are right, that doesn't matter. Like, there's no point to that alignment.
It's a way for being at war with the system, not just the two of us. It's also a way to resolve heteronormativity. It's not just an instance. Do you want me to?